In 2010, just 2 years after one of the largest financial collapses in our nation's history, President Obama signed the DoddFrank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act into law. At that time, President Obama and Congress promised to hold Wall Street accountable, end too big to fail, and protect American families from unfair, abusive financial practices. Those are the facts. But in reality, 6 years later, the DoddFrank Act has not ended taxpayer-funded bailouts, has not provided relief for community financial institutions, and has not expanded consumer choice for Main Street America. Well, many of my friends on the other side of the aisle will argue that the lack of regulation led to the financial collapse of our economy in 2008. The past 6 years have more than made up for it. As of today, the number of finalized regulations under Dodd-Frank has cost hardworking Americans more than $45 billion, with billions in rules that are still pending. But let's not stop there. Let me tell you about our home state of Texas. In 2010, there were 626 FDIC-insured banking institutions in Texas. The most current number of Texas chartered banks and savings institutions now is 472. That is a decline of 154 institutions, or 32%, in a state with the greatest economy in the country. The Dodd-Frank Act created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, otherwise known as the CFPB. Where regulators were busy implementing rules aimed at fixing our recovery financial system, the CFPB was left to implement rules that would protect consumers, or so we thought. In fact, their mission is to make markets for consumer financial products and services work for Americans by promoting transparency and consumer choice and preventing abusive and deceptive financial practices. As many of my colleagues have said in the past, the Bureau has an important mission to carry out. Properly designed, the Bureau would be capable of accomplishing a great deal. But sadly, that is where this fairy tale ends. The Bureau, like all government agencies, must operate with transparency and be held accountable to taxpayers. Unfortunately, that's not how the CFPB was set up. The CFPB is headed by one director appointed by the President for one 5-year term. The CFPB can spend hundreds of millions of dollars each year with no oversight, no control from Congress. Their budget is not subject to congressional appropriations. The CFPB's jurisdiction is so vast, they often create or implement rules over industries they were never intended to regulate and often act without the consumer's best interest in mind. Even when given the chance to exempt smaller financial institutions from their rules, such as under Section 1022 of the DoddFrank Act, the CFPB has largely ignored congressional intent. Simply put, the CFPB needs more checks and balances. In saying that, earlier this year I introduced H.R. 5527, the CFPB Accountability Act of 2016. This bill, which I'm glad to see was included in the Choice Act, would require congressional authorization for any CFPB ruling that would have an economic impact of $100 million or greater. Since the CFPB's inception, we have witnessed unnecessary, costly standards come out of a closed-door agency that have the effect of law. It is time to restore the decision-making power to the lawmakers who are held accountable to the people who sent them to Washington. If the CFPB is granted the power to arbitrarily decide what mortgages, credit cards, and bank accounts Americans can have access to, at the very least, Congress should have the final say. I want to close by reading directly from the White House's website on the Dodd-Frank Act. Quote, "These new rules will build a safer, more stable financial system, one that provides a robust foundation for lasting economic growth and job creation." In my opinion, those words ring hollow, as the Dodd-Frank Act has not fulfilled its mission, and our economy is no better than it was 6 years ago. So we must end too big to fail, protect taxpayer dollars, and make the CFPB more transparent and accountable. The Choice Act will do this and strengthen our financial regulatory system and ultimately the American economy.